Hey, witchy friends, you're listening to another episode of Tu Tia Bruja. I'm Bex Carlos, your host. Hopefully, you are enjoying the content that we're creating, this season so far. It's already episode 4. And for episode 4, I'm excited to have Sapphire Sandalo on the show. Sapphire does a lot of stuff. She's an animator. She has a podcast called Stories with Sapphire. And she's also part of the panel for a Travel Channel show called Paranormal Caught on Camera. Sapphire is super busy and she joined us on the show to talk ghosts, witchy things, the moon, religion. We had a very diverse conversation and I think you're going to really enjoy it. So I'm going to stop talking. Here's my episode with Sapphire.
Hello, nice to meet you. I do a couple different things. Primarily, I am an animator and I have a podcast called Stories with Sapphire where I share like spooky stories and talk about spirituality, stuff like that. And I also am on a Travel Channel show called Paranormal Caught on Camera. So I'm one of the panelists on that. And then I'm also going to be on an upcoming show called Paranormal Night Shift.
What got you interested in the paranormal?
So it goes way back to when I was younger. Even though I was a huge scaredy cat, I had always been really interested in ghost stories. And I think that started because my grandfather, he always told us these really cool experiences that he had when he lived in the Philippines. So that was sort of my introduction to Filipino folklore and mythology, like because my grandpa had seen all of it and it was just really intriguing. And the way that he told the stories and the way that my family tells these stories, it comes from a place of truth. It's not like, oh, grandpa's just making up stuff to scare you. Like, nope, this is real.
Isn't it amazing how some people just have the ability to see things or have encounters that they can't explain, but you just know in your heart of hearts is the honest truth of what happened?
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, because I work so much in the paranormal community and like paranormal stuff, people always assume, like, oh, well, you must have some really crazy paranormal experiences yourself. And I actually haven't. Like, I probably am one of the only people in my family that's never really experienced anything or has a ghost story of my own. But I am a full believer. Like when people tell me their stories, I wasn't there. I don't know what they saw, but I know that they believe what they saw and what they felt. So in that sense, it is real.
It's everybody, just like in my close family, they have had an experience that I'm just like, I know that this is real.
Right.
Is there any like a paranormal story that really just still chills you to the core?
Oh, I mean, well, when I was in, I think it was like fourth grade or so, that's when my mom first, I don't know why this came up, but she brought up the Exorcist movie and she was like, you know why it's considered the scariest movie of all time? And I was like, no, why? And she was like, because it's based on real events. And so we went to Blockbuster and we rented it and then we watched it as a family. And then my mom was like telling me all these like behind the scenes facts, like while we're watching it. And so it was just like a really interesting experience just because it was also probably the first horror movie that really made me interested in the genre of horror because I always was interested in just like the paranormal stuff, but like horror movies, this was sort of like the first thing that really made me go, "Ooh, I think I want to like watch more of these and I want to make these maybe one day." And it was also just the way that my mom talked about that movie. She treated it like it was a documentary. So, I wasn't watching this like a fictional movie. I was like, oh, so when you're possessed, your head spins around and you like barf green stuff. Like, I thought that that's what possession and exorcism was. But then, like, now I know that it's not. I don't know. It was a really important movie for me because I feel like it shaped so much of my beliefs, I guess, even though it was incorrect at first. But
Was your mom a super religious person?
oh, yeah, she's super Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I'm technically a Catholic, but I don't really practice. My entire family is also Catholic as well. So these beliefs, the things that my mom would say, like growing up, just like Things like, don't stick your tongue out because like, God will chop it off, like, things like that, like, she always instilled these things to scare me to not do certain things. I had asked her about it recently, and I was like, "Do you remember saying all those things?" And she's like, "Yeah, I just said it to scare you."
My mom would say similar stuff, like, if I was out
Oh, yeah.
after midnight, the devil would come out and drag me under my bed, that might have been a lot more intense,
Yeah, no, that's I had a similar one to that too. Like my cousin told me that if you whistled at night, it calls the devil over. And so I know it's so funny just like how what's the word I'm looking for? We just kind of like throw around the devil, you know? Like don't do this cuz the devil's going to come and get you. It's just like it's just in casual conversation.
Yeah, I so it's funny because, like, as an adult, I'm really into, I guess, like, brujeria and just, like, different types of magic because it's a way of, like, reconnecting with my ancestors. And because, I watched The Exorcist so young, I was really scared of anything, like, witchy. Like, I thought I was
Mhm.
gonna get possessed.
Right.
So until, like, maybe age 21, when I kinda got over that, around probably 25, I think is when I really got over it. I started, like, digging into stuff because I just feel like, I don't know, Catholicism just never resonated with me.
Same. And you know why though? Well, actually, I don't like do you identify as a woman?
Yeah.
That's why. Catholicism historically has, like, been very misogynist. I mean, the fact that, like, women can't be priests and also just this is a revelation I had quite recently, actually, is that, the whole story of Virgin Mary, it never occurred to me that, like, the reason why that story exists, like, the mother of God did not become pregnant through sex. It was like the Catholic Church doesn't even want to admit that, like, the mother of God had sexual relations ever. It's sort of just like that idea that women need to be these chaste, celibate things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, to be, like, valued. Well, I mean, I think that that's why I feel like a lot of Catholic men, I mean, religious men, period, tend to have, like, Madonna whore complex because
Mhm.
they can either be, like, very chaste or they can either be, like, sexually promiscuous, and there doesn't seem to be an in between.
Right. There's no spectrum.
We share that in common from the colonizers, so yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there that we could trauma bond over because, like, really, I don't, honestly, Catholicism kind of fucked me up.
Oh, yeah, and that's the thing, it's like you don't understand why you feel these things until you're much older and you go, "Oh." Like, I'm trying to think of an example, but I'm kind of short, but, like, I don't know, I mean, like, as a kid, you f like, I don't know about you, but I was an altar server. I was, because my parents, like, made me. I did, like, all of the things, to be, like, a good Catholic kid, but I never really felt connected with the religion, and I always had this pull towards things that were considered darker or like occult or whatever. And now, in the past like couple of years, when I've really started to dive deep into Filipino history, Filipino traditions, and what indigenous Filipinos practiced before the colonizers came, I made the connection. I was like, oh, the reason why I don't really identify with Catholicism and why I feel this pull towards things like talking with spirits and connecting with nature is because that's what my ancestors did. So that's like in my blood. And so my DNA is telling me this is what you should be doing, not this like other shit.
Super true. And honestly, I my favorite part about Catholicism is using parts of it to just invalidate it. That's like one of my favorite, like, amusements as of late as an adult. I love my parents and I feel like we're at the level now where we, like, respect each other's opinions and we can, like, have a debate about stuff. And I was just like, well, honestly, mom and dad, even if they're not, like, hardcore Catholics, they're still Catholic in some way. I think that
Mhm.
that's, like, the customs that they cling to. And I was like, well, I mean, if God exists, which I'm not sure about. I think possibly God exists, but if the God, I guess, that is put out does exist, I don't worship him.
Yeah, and actually, you just reminded me of another way that Catholicism is very misogynist, is the fact that God is referred to as a father. and Jesus is a man. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know what the Holy Spirit is, but, just very, like, patriarchy, and to me, I don't know, but, like, I feel like the idea of, like, I don't know, like, Mother Nature feels a little bit more natural to me, or, like, like the I don't know. I subscribe to a female god more than I do a male god, and also, like, the story of, Adam and Eve. Eve is the one who is the sinner, and also Eve is from Adam. So it's just literally every story that comes out of Catholicism is just like women be fucking shit up for other people.
So you know what I find fascinating about that? It's funny that you mentioned that because today I was on a whole kick about reading about Lilith and reading about Eve and Adam. And so Lilith being Adam's first wife was sort of like turned into a demon or whatever. And I guess at some point God eliminates her and Lucifer gets really mad. And then Eve is supposed to have been in Lilith's likeness. And it was just an interesting like thing that I was looking into about it, and how basically like if that's the case, then the whole thing in the garden would have been that Lucifer had sexual relations with Eve, and then Eve had sex with Adam. And if that's the case, is it possible that Cain and Abel had different dads?
Hmm. And one of them was the devil's.
Cain would have been the older one, the first one.
Mhm.
So he would have been Lucifer's son. And I'm like, I don't know. There's just that's like a thought that's kind of been put in my head, and I'm like, I'm into it, and it explains a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I really like looking back at things that I was taught. Like, I don't know about you, but I was in Catholic school my entire life. Went to a Catholic elementary school, a Catholic all girls high school, and a Jesuit university. So, like, I know Catholicism inside and out. And even then, I'm still like, I look back on things that we learned with, and I look at it with like such a different lens now. I mean, like, maybe 5 or so years ago, I would look at it and be like, God, all of this stuff is so stupid. But now that I'm learning about other religions and other practices, I'm starting to see a lot of connections. Like all religions have more in common than they do differences, at least in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about that.
I agree with that, but I will say that I a lot of times am really impressed with Islam's approach to things, which I feel like Islam gets a really bad reputation. But when I was reading
Mhm.
about Adam and Eve, it was interesting because most of the Western faiths tend to believe that it was like Eve's fault, whereas apparently when it's referred to in Islam, it's both of their faults, like it's mutually both of
Hmm.
their faults. So I
Okay.
didn't know that, and I thought that that was very interesting when I was kind of researching. There's a lot of things about Islam that I do really find interesting, as well as the idea of interest isn't
Mhm.
used. I'm about that. That's all right. So, real quick, we're going to take a pause from the episode. And I think that it's very clear that if you are a magic practitioner and you are trying to do any type of work, I think you should always do a type of divination. You know what I mean? Like, I think that you should really assess the situation and see if maybe someone needs to give you some perspective. When I am at my wits' end, someone that I always reach out to is Melissa at Temperance Home and Bar, because she's an angel and she reads my cards. She's super patient and she knows how to get through to me in a way that's like, hey, let's take another approach to this. Maybe there's a better way. In addition to being my witchy conscience sometimes, she also makes a lot of different products depending on her client, you know? So if you are looking for a personalized item with intention, talk to Melissa. She might be able to make something really cool for you. Check her out. She is so talented and she's always willing to take on a new challenge. Check her out. It's Melissa at Temperance Home and Bar. Let's get back into the episode. Have you ever seen the show The Good Place?
Yes, I love it.
Same. And sometimes I wonder which group really did get it right.
Doug got it right.
Doug got it right. You're right. Then Doug
Yeah.
wasn't even allowed
Uh-huh.
to get into the good place, so the whole system is fucked.
Right. Oh god, that show is so good. You mentioned something that kinda reminded me of something, in Filipino mythology. So, if Islam views Adam and Eve as both being the original sinners, in the Filipino creation myth, the first man and woman, I believe it's Malakas and Maganda, I might be wrong, but they were born out of these bamboo trees, and they were born at the same time. So that shows that men and women were seen as equals, and I thought that was like really nice.
That is nice. See, some people get it.
Yeah, I know. I just like I Oh, and there's another thing that I recently learned about too. I think one of my friends posted it on social media, but they posted images of vagina next to images of the Virgin Mary, and the caption was it was something like that moment when you realize that the Virgin Mary is literally just a symbol for the vagina. And like so if you Google that, like that image of Mother Mary like in the blue cape thingy and she's got her hands out. When you really look at the shape of that, like, it's a vagina, and it blew my mind. I was just like, "Whoa, that's cool."
That is cool. That doesn't surprise me though, because I feel like a lot of artists who were kind of made to create like religious art found ways to kind of be like, fuck you. I got the opportunity to go and see the Sistine Chapel, and I was just like so amazed when I was like looking at it. I'm like there's penises everywhere, being like, look at this beautiful religious wonderful piece, but also
Look at all these dicks.
yeah.
A lot of art back then was nudes and stuff, but I don't actually no, there was a period of time I remember where they like covered up statues with fig leaves and things. I remember there was like a period where they were like, no nudity and sculptures and paintings. And I don't remember where that falls when the Sistine Chapel was painted. Here's a fun little fact. I don't know if you've heard of this, but you know how all the bodies in that painting or in the Sistine Chapel's paintings, like the women look kind of not like women, and that's because I believe, like, women weren't allowed to be nude models, so that's why a lot of sculptures and paintings of women look very mannish is because they were not able to, they just I don't remember if it was like "Oh, we don't trust you to have a naked woman in front of you, like, we don't trust that you're, like, not gonna assault them." But yeah, I don't know, I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I don't know. I just think that back then women are still not allowed to do everything
Mhm.
now, just of the way the world works. But back then it was way more restrictive. And I just think that that was probably just one of those things that they thought was indecent.
Yeah, it was probably like, yeah, along those lines. But then it's so
Yeah.
silly because like you're still painting a naked woman, so does it matter who the model is that you use?
It's just the logic sometimes of past societies. I'm just like, but you didn't do this, but you would do this. Whatever. One thing I do kind of want to circle back to, you had kind of said that you had started to get really into different kind of like customs and stuff. Do you consider yourself a witch or kind of just a spiritual person?
That's something that I'm still sort of figuring out. Like, I've always been curious about witchcraft and stuff like that. And I have a friend who is a witch, and she says that I'm in the broom closet, which I think is like a really cute saying. She's like, "You're a witch, Sapphire. You're just in the broom closet." But I'm still like figuring out, like, I don't know if a witch is the right word to describe me. And I'm also still trying to figure out, like, what it is that I even believe or I don't know because like I do there are some like things that I do that I think some people would consider witchcraft. Like simple things like manifesting stuff. Like technically that's witchcraft. Like when you make a vision board, like that's kind of witchcraft, but people don't really like view it that way. And right now I'm sort of learning a lot about Filipino shamanism. That's something that really interests me and I feel very connected to just because it's something that is in my ancestry. So that's sort of what I'm like trying to learn more about now. Like not that I'm going to be a shaman, but it's like learning how to use shamanism in your life, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that it's really interesting to kind of like learn the customs of your ancestors and things that they would use to like heal
Mhm.
themselves. Just because if you decide to do that, that's something that you could explore, or maybe why specifically certain things call to you. Kind of like you, I'm trying to figure it all out. The other day, I was talking to my parents and they were like, well, what do you think happens when you die? I'm like, I'm kind of under the impression that you go to a place and from there you can choose to stay there. You can choose to come back and live again if you feel like you haven't learned everything and like kind of you can come back to Earth and you can be someone who chooses to go the path of knowledge or someone who doesn't. And if you're really terrible, you go to a different place. I don't like it's weird because I don't believe in Catholicism necessarily, but I feel like there has to be something that our energies do because we are
Mhm.
energy. Or in a perfect, I guess, universe, what happens in the good place would be what happens. I don't know. I believe in reincarnation. I think that that is something that happens. But I also think that not everyone chooses to do that. And I also think that, like, sometimes spirits are stuck. Sometimes humans can be just kind of destroyed beyond repair because they feel like something wasn't complete. There's something that was never figured out and they're kind of still here. And they kind of roam.
Mhm.
That tends to happen when something really traumatic happens towards the end that they just like felt was unfinished.
Right.
So I don't know, but I do know the deities that I worship, that I like really look at. I pray to the
Mhm.
universe because the universe is here and that is not arguable. And we also die. So Santa Muerte is someone like I pray to just because I would like to, if we're all going to die, instead of like dreading it and expecting it to be something terrible, I'd rather just have a good
Mhm.
time with, the entity that is death.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never thought of viewing death as an entity. That's kind of nice.
Well, that's what Santa Muerte
Mhm.
is, the personification of death.
Right. Okay, cool. Is that what you
Yeah.
practice? What is it? Santa Muerto? Marta?
Santa Muerte. She is and it's weird because even though I don't believe in Catholicism, I believe in
Mhm.
her. I find witches fascinating. I feel like there's been a lot of examples of people being labeled witches who were just like
Mhm.
healers or using herbalism or whatever. I feel like brujo was just the labeled term that like the Spanish
Yeah.
used for anything magical. Because I think for a really long time I was just really afraid of death and now I'm just like I'd rather just imagine that it's all going to be figured out because death personified is just going to make sure it's fine.
Yeah. The more that I pick apart Catholicism, like it's not necessarily the religion itself that's problematic. What's problematic is the way that people have taught the religion and spread the religion. Like those are the things that are an issue because at its core, Catholicism, all it is teaching, love one another and like, whatever, like be a good person kind of thing. But like what really kind of muddles the message is stuff like, oh, well, women can't be priests. Eve like was the first sinner. Like, like all those like little details that I think were just a product of its time, really, that's like carried over. I think that's like the problem.
No, I agree. I think that the thing that is different is that, like, for Catholics who are in Mexico, they have the opportunity to make it like a whole
Mhm.
lifestyle around going to Mass, where I feel like a lot of Americans view their faith as Catholics as a curse.
Mhm.
They don't always enjoy it. It's not like a way of life. So I don't know. It's different to see how different groups of people treat their faith.
Yeah, and actually that makes me think of something. Like I remember when I was talking to my sister about like full moons, like how the phases of the moon, it's like they represent different things. So like when it's a new moon, that's a good time to meditate on things that you want to bring into your life. And then a full moon is when you meditate on things that you want to release. But like the whole idea of like syncing up the intentions that you have throughout the day, like syncing that up with the moon. I remember I was talking about that with my sister. My sister was like, "I don't understand that. Like, what does that do?" And then, like, I remember in the moment, I couldn't really explain it. Like, I didn't. I was like, "I don't know. You're just like syncing up with nature." But like, what I realized is that things like Christmas or Lent, like these very like Catholic seasons, it's literally exactly the same thing when you look at paganism or indigenous practices, right? Like everything is seasons and it's literally the same. It's when you are syncing up with what is going on. Like you're syncing your life up and how you're feeling and all that stuff, like with what's going on with nature, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And it's really funny because I for a while I was using different types of hormonal birth control. And when I made the shift from not taking that anymore, it took a while for my cycle to adjust, but it's linked up to the moon now because it was just so funny when because I had all these moon rituals planned, leave things out with intention. And I was just so tired and I passed out. And I guess I'd been kind of worried about when it was going to show up because it was just kind of like off or whatever. And then, yeah, it had with the moon. I was like, oh, I've recharged. And now I'm angry and whatnot.
That's cool though that you're synced up with the moon. I mean, the whole reason why we have months, like, isn't that because of the moon cycle? At least in that little length of the moon. So that's cool.
Living in my power. Speaking of which, Halloween is on the full moon, which I love.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and it's on a Saturday. This year, like, if we were grateful humans and we were able to treat people well, maybe we would be able to have like a lot of fun. I think we're kind of living in the state that we're living in.
Mm. I know I'm really bummed out that I can't go to the Halloween attractions and stuff this year because that was, like, my thing. Like, Halloween's my season. Like, I get to go to, like, Universal Studios and do the mazes, and then, like, there's a bunch of really cool interactive theater events in LA that I like going to, and now they're all canceled. Well, I mean, they're not officially canceled, but I'm not going.
Yeah, it's just not safe to go.
No.
I've really tried to limit the people that I interact with, just trying to interact with the same 10 people,
Mhm.
no more, no less, to just try and, I don't know. It's just, this reminds me that class projects are hard.
I think I saw that on Twitter, like, somebody compared the wearing masks to, people in the class project. All the people that are wearing masks are basically the people who do all of the work in a group project, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's so true."
Honestly, I think that that's why I also become a little bit more of a recluse because
Mhm.
sometimes it's easier just to hang out by myself because there's no expectations.
Yeah. No, I mean, I am also a very solitary person, and it took months of the pandemic before I had the feeling of, okay, I need to see someone. But I could be solitary for a very long time, which isn't, like, great, I know, but
I feel you because I used to, it's weird because I had something like kind of shift in my brain, and there was a very long time where I recharged being around people. Like, I loved being around people. And kind of now, maybe it's just because like I work in audio work for long hours on end. You could be editing work and you're just kind of hanging out by yourself
Mhm.
doing that. So, audio work has made me a hermit.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I've been working from home for the past, like, 5 years, so when the lockdown happened, I was like, nothing has changed for me, so
Same.
yeah, I mean, the only difference is that, like, I don't really have much of a choice to stay home as opposed to me willingly choosing not to go out.
Yeah, I'm just reminded that Halloween is in our hearts,
Yes.
and I'm really lucky to have a space that I can still decorate. So I'm like, I'm gonna do that.
Nice.
Just gotta make Halloween happen in whatever way we can.
Mhm. Do you have any, like, cool Halloween traditions that you do?
So I've recently just started getting more into like Dia de los
Mm.
Muertos. I try to have like various things that I do, put out candles and like an altar for family through the 31st through the 2nd of November. So that's something I do. How about yourself?
I now have, like, a little altar where I have pictures of my great-grandparents just because I've been trying to, like, connect with them, like, on a spiritual level for a couple months. For Halloween, I really like to do the interactive theater events in LA, like, interactive haunted houses, so it's not really like the stuff that you walk through for, like, a couple minutes and they just, like, pop out at you. It's stuff like an interactive play, but it's really spooky, and they, like, come up to you. They do, like, well, not like it's not, like, weird. But yeah, I like going to those types of events during Halloween, so that's why I'm super bummed because 'cause I'm not doing that this year.
No, I feel you. I really just like watching like Halloween movies. I feel like that feels good.
Yes.
So I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Like this year, I'll really set aside the time
Mhm.
to watch several movies and get refamiliarized with ones I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's something me and my husband do too. It's, whenever or every October, we'll watch a horror movie every single night of the month, and it's really fun.
All right, Sapphire. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can everyone follow you and check out the podcast?
My podcast is called Stories with Sapphire, and it is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can find me on social media on Instagram and Twitter at Awkward Sapphire. And my YouTube channel is just my full name, Sapphire Sandalo.
So, yeah, all the information to follow Sapphire is in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really love when I can have a conversation with someone who knows Catholicism and the Bible and all of that better than I do, because I'm going to be quite honest with you. My knowledge there is definitely lacking. It could be more. But Sapphire knows a bunch of information and we had such a great talk. So definitely support her. All of the information there is in the show notes. If you want to follow the podcast, follow Tutia Bruja. You can check out our Instagram, our Twitter. You can pretty much find us everywhere that you find podcasts. I think the only one that I'm working on getting on is Amazon because they're accepting podcasts, but otherwise we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Google Podcasts, which might be called something different now, but whatever, we're there. We are on iHeartRadio, we are on Stitcher. Like I said, pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find us. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you. If you want to collaborate or work together this season of Tutia Bruja, please reach out. My website is bexbcaston.com. There's a Tutia Bruja tab. You can get in contact with me there, or there's also an email section on the website where you can just send me a direct email or slip it in my DMs. Whatever. I love to chat. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you. Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah.